How's it going, everybody? And welcome to episode 335 of Master My Garden podcast. Now, this week's episode is going to be a very apt episode, a very relatable episode, I know, to many of you guys listening. And it's looking at how we can, I suppose, protect our garden, ensure that we have flowers going into the summer, because the weather here, for any of you listening outside of Ireland, maybe it's not the case for you, but here in Ireland it has been horrendous. It's the only word for it. We've had, and I know I kind of talk and have been talking a lot about the weather this year, but so, it is so relevant to what we're doing, and it affects what we're doing in such a real way. We're a small island on the edge of the Atlantic, and we are definitely, you know, taking the brunt of things in terms of rainfall. Speaking to somebody in the UK this morning, and they've had, a relatively nice spring and early summer, some rain, but nothing to the extent that we've had. And yeah, it's definitely been a challenging year to date in the garden, and that's what we're going to look at. I suppose what the idea is, so many of our summer favorite flowers are out now, roses, peonies, etc. And there's a danger that as the weeks pass by with still more rain and wind, we're getting a lot of wind as well, that we don't get to see the full benefit of some of these flowers. So we're going to look at some techniques and things that we can do to ensure that we get to enjoy these when, fingers crossed, the weather eventually settles. Again, I feel like I've said that so many times. Uh, and I hope I'm not sounding like a broken record, but it is so tied to everything we do in the garden and so relevant. Yeah, so that's the subject for this week's episode. Before we get into that, a message from this week's sponsor, and this week's sponsor is Crann by Probio. And Crann is a product which is actually going to be relevant as we go through today's conversation. It's a brilliant product. It's a natural fungicide essentially that will, be effective against botrytis, against pythium, fusarium, which are all fungal infections. And what it does, it increases the plant's resilience, makes them less susceptible to disease. It actually promotes growth and new growth on plants. Really effective against box blight, other leaf diseases in things like Portuguese laurel, and a really effective product to use across your whole garden. So whether that's your buxus, your roses, your apple trees, your vegetables, it promotes growth, helps the nutrients be available for the plants, creates resilient plants, more resistant plants, and that's exactly what we're going to need, over the coming months, especially with this weather that we're having now. You'll find all of the products on www.probiocarbon.ie, and I'll put the link to that in the show notes. It's a product that I have used, so very, very comfortable recommending it, and yeah, very, very effective. I haven't used it, as I said before, on Buxus Blight, but it's something that people are getting an awful lot of success with. Estate gardens have brought back large areas of Buxus hedging as a result of using this on a couple of times across a season, basically following a plan. And yeah, a really super product. As I say, it'll be quite relevant as we go through this episode. Yeah, so we're talking about basically trying to maximize our gardens given the weather that we're having. And to put a bit of context, as I said, some of you guys listening in the US or the UK, you may not be having the weather that we're having. And to put it into context, this week we've had temperatures that have hit at times 18 or 20 degrees Celsius, but have also dropped down as far as 4 degrees, 5 degrees, 6 degrees. On top of that, we've had a pretty constant wind. We've had periods of really bright sunshine, really beautiful, nice weather that we'd be kind of hoping to get at this time of the year. And then 20 minutes later, you could be wrapped up in your best rain gear with a howling wind blowing and an absolute downpour. And of course, what's happening is we're getting a lot of rain falling. We're getting that coupled with wind because it's going from sunny and calm to gusting and raining. It's very, very hard on certain plants. And, a lot of the more tender perennials are getting battered and bruised, window boxes, hanging baskets, particularly that have, that can blow around, they're getting battered and bruised. And so we're going to look at some simple techniques and tips to maybe help those, to maybe improve them, and to ensure that, we get real benefit out of these over the coming months. Because while on the one hand, the year is moving on and we are up to the middle of June, there's still the potential, with your window boxes, with your roses, with your hanging baskets, with a lot of your flowers, to have flower from now right through to the end of September. So we have the potential to have a long period of enjoyment from these if we can sort of keep them in reasonable shape over the next period of time until this weather changes and we get something consistent and sunny and warm and nice. Again, I feel like I've said this before, so I hope I don't sound like a broken record while I'm saying it, but it is definitely relevant. If you go around the country, you'll see a lot of lovely flowers and they're just feeling sorry for themselves. And it is as a result of this really bizarre type weather we're having. So what can we do or what should we do? So I suppose the things that we're seeing now as a result of this rain, if you take, for example, the main flowers, the sort of statement flowers, the ones that we associate with this time of the year, that really are looking their best or should be looking their best at this stage. We're talking about things like peonies, and we're talking about things like roses, and some of the perennials, the likes of lupins and so on. And the reality is that they're not getting a chance to. Every so often we get these little batches of sunshine and they can look spectacular. But in between, just this harsh wind, heavy rain, and it results in flowers holding water, which leads to rotting, plants falling over. Again, when they're falling over, they will not look their best. They're very hard to revive. So we're going to look at things that we can do to kind of combat all that. The other thing that happens when you have this warmth or some warmth and you have this moisture, you get obviously our friends slugs and snails, which we mentioned a few weeks ago on the podcast, but also disease, buildup of mildews, and that type of disease at this stage. So yeah, there's a lot of challenges. Um, I know when we say this, this is, I suppose, they're in the grand scheme of things, they're not huge issues, not huge problems, but there's still things that that will stop us from getting full enjoyment from our plants. So we're going to look at ways to sort of counteract. We can't obviously pull a cover over the country, put a roof over the country. We can't stop the weather. It will be whatever it's going to be. But we can do things that will make our plants better, more resilient, and make ourselves, be a little bit more dynamic, let's say, so we can maybe take planters in and out as the weather dictates and get maximum benefit from it that way. So kind of got to go through a list of maybe 6 or 7 things that we can do. First thing is deadheading. And I know you're going to be screaming, that's so obvious. So, you know, everybody does this, but it's super important when you have rain that we've had now. If you take, for example, a peony, large cup flower, rain falling, be that heavy rain or even light rain, rain falling, the cup is holding all that moisture. Sometimes they won't actually get to open out at all. They won't be able to burst the bud at all. They'll just be half open, filled with water, and they'll rot. If you leave that there, it'll hang to one side, it'll touch off the next flower, it'll start to rot that. If you if you don't take action, you'll basically end up with no quality flower coming from your plant. Same thing goes for roses, very, very similar. So what we're going to do is we're going to deadhead and we're going to be quite ruthless on it at this stage. It's really important because if you don't, that's what's going to happen. You're going to end up with a lot of rotting. Very same thing applies to your window boxes, to your planters, which are summer bedding. You know, get in there now and deadhead and take out anything that's causing rotting. These could be even flowers that are just opened. They could be good flowers, but as soon as they're starting to hold water and discoloring in any way, that's it. They're basically on the move towards a rotting flower. And yeah, one flower will lead to another and so on. So get in and deadhead, and as I say, be ruthless with that. So if there's any discoloring of them at all, then take them out, cut off that particular dead flower. Don't take out the whole stem, take off that particular dead flower, and then that will allow the space for the new ones to push into over the next couple of weeks. So really important things that you should and could be deadheading. Roses, as I mentioned, deadhead them, get the flowers, take them out of the area. Watch out for any leaves that might be gone fully discolored, like yellow leaves, any damaged branches. Take all those away now. Don't let them fall on the ground. Don't just, chop them and leave them there. Take them away, get them to your compost heap and get them away from that plant. What we want to do is we want to obviously take away dead flowers from the purpose of, stopping them from rotting and rotting the next one. But also we want to open up that plant a little bit and allow some air to come through it so that they can dry out, so that they can, breathe a little bit, I guess. So deadhead and be rootless. Things like roses, peonies, bedding plants, sweet pea, those type plants. Even things like your perennials. Take off some of the like for example a lupin. There's a flower stalk that has gone over. Take that one out. Wait for the new ones to come underneath it. And yeah, it's a good way of, and a really important, like deadheading is vital when we have weather like we have at the moment. It's quite important in the summertime, even in a good summer, but it's vital at this stage when you have it, because otherwise what will end up happening is one flower will rot the other. And if you go a month down the line, you haven't bothered to deadhead, what will end up happening is you'll end up, all the flower heads will have rotted off, and you'll end up with, on something like a window box, you'll end up with a load of green leaves and very, very little flower. So really important to do it at the moment. Second thing to do, and this is relevant for kind of taller plants, they have got a real battering. Things like delphiniums, foxgloves, lupins, plants that are tall and, are not that strong in the stem, particularly, as I said, penstemons, delphiniums, those type plants. If you haven't already, and you should have, but if you haven't already, get something around them, support them. Canes, loops, the metal loops, the metal circles, anything that will stop them from taking the full brunt of that wind and blowing over and back and over and back, because they will just get damaged, they'll get broken. And I've seen already in some of the Facebook groups and so on, people putting up pictures of various types of perennials just flattened. So you should have from the time that they're growing up early in the springtime, you should have some support there. But if you haven't and you've gotten away with it so far, or mostly got away with it so far, get in and get them supported somehow. You can use things as simple as four canes and a little bit of string just to hold them into one place, that they're not being battered and blown over and back and so on. So support the plants, and as particularly the bigger ones. So number one is deadheading. Number two is support the plants. Number three is one that is important as well, and it comes and goes in terms of whether it's an issue or not. At the moment, it is 100%, and that's watch out for diseases. So we're looking on, across our garden, things like roses. We're looking at apples, maybe our strawberry plants outside, could be botrytis, spots on the leaves. And they're all, early indicators of disease. Roses particularly are going to struggle with warm temperatures and huge amounts of moisture. So again, a few things. clear any rotting material away, any diseased branches, any damaged leaves, anything that's looking a little bit off, take it out of there. We want as much airflow as possible. This is husbandry now. These are the things we do to improve and make things less likely to happen. So we're taking out anything that might stop airflow through. So allow them to get as much air through them as possible, and that will help. Airflow through the plants will help. Um, Again, take away any debris that goes to your compost heap. It doesn't go back onto the ground around it. Take away that altogether and keep an eye out, and then use things like the Crann that I mentioned at the start of the show, or something else that you might need to treat in order to keep those plants healthy over the next couple of months. Because as I say, it's still only, early June as such, heading for mid-June, and we still have so much time in front of us to, enjoy all these plants. But if they get a little bit battered at this stage, or they pick up a disease at this stage, and it gets in on them, then you're not going to see the full benefit of them at all this year. So that's another thing that we need to do. So watch out for disease, and tr treat if needed. Uh, Make the conditions such that there's less build-up of diseases. And yeah, kind of little husbandry things, but really, really important. Number four is containers. And again, it's deadheading and tidying containers. And what I mentioned here earlier, that we might need to be a little bit, dynamic and change things a little bit. So on our containers, we do our deadheading, as I mentioned in point one, but also what we could be doing at this stage is getting them in. Maybe, for example, if you have a hanging basket at your front door, it's hanging there, it's getting blown around. Just take it in for a few days. Give it a chance. Deadhead it, feed it if necessary, um, and just give it a chance to, I suppose, to reinvigorate itself over the next week or so. Because again, it's still so early. If you have a hanging basket, like a hanging basket is a great example here. Um, it might be just getting blown around and blown around, and blown around. And at this stage, if it gets battered too much, you're just never going to see the benefit of it, or the it reach its full potential. Or if you do, it might be in 4 weeks, 5 weeks time. Whereas if you take it in now, just give it a little breather. It doesn't need to be blown around, flying from side to side across the front door. Take it in or take it down, give it a little bit of shelter, feed it a little bit, and deadhead it, and have it ready to go when the weather eventually settles. Fingers crossed. Same thing could be said with containers. Containers on the ground. Maybe there's a certain spot that's just getting really hit hard with rain and wind. Why not just move them around to the other side where they're getting a little bit of shelter? They can still stay outside, but it's just they're not getting battered in that way. And then whenever the conditions are suitable again, move them back to where it is that you wanted them in the first place. You can be a little bit, as I said, dynamic. You can move things to suit whatever's happening at that time. Next thing on the list is to have a look around now and see what plants are totally unbothered by what is happening. A good example here, I have a bed with some lupins that were sowed from seed last year. They flowered brilliantly. They're absolutely battered now. Um, they'll probably come on again, but they have got battered. They just got blown around or holding water. They're slightly lying over to the side. They look a bit shabby, and that's a good example of plants that need supporting, need minding, whatever. But right beside them, there is hardy geraniums. Don't know the variety. They're a pink hardy geranium. There's three of them together. They're absolutely unbothered by the weather. They're blowing up and down, but the flower looks perfect. It isn't in any way affected. There's no rotting flowers on it. The plant itself looks healthy. So it's not all plants. So if you were able to spot some of the ones that are performing really well, they can sit in your most exposed spots without any bother. So it's a good time to have a look and see which ones work and which ones are a little bit more tender, and then that gives you future knowledge for maybe what come down the line. Next one on the list is sort of similar to deadheading, but it's a very relevant one for perennials, and that's the Chelsea chop. And the Chelsea chop, essentially, what it is, it's a hard pruning of perennials to encourage bushy growth and encourage, in some cases, a second flush of flowers. And the name Chelsea chop comes from it's typically done the last week of May or thereabouts when the Chelsea flower show is on. And it would have been synonymous with Chelsea because that's the timing of it. Normally you wouldn't do the Chelsea drop past kind of early June, but this year because of our cold and wet spring, things are a little bit behind. So now actually is the perfect time to do the Chelsea chop. Now it isn't suitable for all perennials, but you can do it on things like catmint, phlox, the likes of asters, rudbeckias, sedums, that type of perennial. You can do the Chelsea chop, which essentially means you take it down by a third or up to a half, and it'll look very harsh. The plant will look a little bit shabby, but give it a week or two, couple of weeks, you'll see a new flush of growth coming and potentially new flowers coming on top of that. And it's just a way of strengthening the plant, and I suppose giving you a second flush of flowers later in the year. Chelsea chop is well used by a lot of gardeners. It's it's a very, very good way of, I suppose, reinvigorating a plant that looks a little bit shabby at this stage of the year. You can also lupins, for example. Lupins is one that people will say don't you can't do the Chelsea chop, and technically you can't. The Chelsea chop is, as I said, taken off a third or up to a half of the plant all in one go. And that can be a little bit harsh, and it definitely doesn't work for something like lupins. But what you can do with lupins is where you get, this a flowering lupin will flower over whatever period, like 6 or 7 weeks or thereabouts, whatever it is, 8 weeks. And you'll have some flowers that'll come early and some that'll come late. For example, those ones that I said that are kind of blown over and battered, they have flower stems that are basically past their best now. They're quite tall, but down underneath them, there is new flower stems coming. So rather than in a scenario like this doing the Chelsea chop where we take it halfway down, we'll just go in and remove, not deadheading, we'll remove the complete stem where those first flowers are. Remove the complete stem. And then what will happen is below that, then these other flower heads are already on the way up, and they will take over. But it'll take that kind of, I suppose, untidy look or um, that kind of blustered look off it and make it look fresh and vibrant again. It'll also mean that, like I said at the start about the deadheading, those flowers that are gone over won't be holding the water, won't be lining on top of the new ones coming through, and it'll just mean a more fresh, vibrant growth. Peonies, for example, you can't do the Chelsea chop on that. Delphiniums, foxgloves, things like that. Um, but there is, particularly on lupins, you can do that. You can take out individual stem and let the other ones come through. Speaking of foxgloves, it's an unbelievable year for foxgloves just generally. Um, I don't know why, whatever conditions seem to be perfect for them this year because I've never seen as many foxgloves as I've seen out just generally in nature this year. There seems to be a lot of them. So obviously conditions are suiting foxgloves, and they're a beautiful flower, obviously in this time of the year. So a couple of spots here locally. There's a kind of a stone wall with a bit of a bank on top of it, not in our land here, but in that area, and they're looking fabulous at the moment. Just loads of them. Um, in other things, just they're big things. So I'll just shoot over that list again. Number one, deadhead and be ruthless with that. And number two, support the plants if you don't have them already. Watch out for disease over the next couple of weeks. Containers, give them a tidy, a deadhead, a feed if you need them. Move those pots back inside or into a sheltered location if possible. Have a look around the garden, see which plants haven't been affected at all by this crazy weather, and they're good ones to go forward with. Hardy geraniums is a standout here, and then number seven is the Chelsea chop, which is being done or can be done slightly later this year because of the late spring. But they're all good ways of, I suppose, ensuring that we get some flower, get a lot of flower, hopefully, between now and the end of sort of September time. So hopefully they help. Hopefully they're relevant for your garden at the moment. Um, Other than that, last weekend, Leash Garden Festival Buds and Blossoms was on last Sunday. Brilliant, brilliant day. Weather wasn't good for it. It came and went. Some rain came and went, but generally speaking, it was a very good day. There was a big crowd there. Didn't get to see the speakers. I was minding my 7-year-old, and she was not on for listening to speakers. So I got to shoot around some of the nurseries, got to meet a few people, bumped into a few listeners who I'd never met before who said hello, and that was lovely as well. And yeah, it was a really nice, right, nice day, big crowd again. So yeah, seemed to go down really well. Yeah, hopefully your garden is not getting too battered. Hopefully you can implement some of those little tips and tricks that will help over the coming weeks. Hopefully, and this is probably the 1000th time I've said this since the start of the year, hopefully the weather takes up soon and we get something like a little bit of settled sunshine, warmth, and yeah, we don't need too much more rain for sure. But that's been this week's episode. Thanks for listening, and until the next time, happy gardening.